The single mom waitress dropped a plate. The mafia boss stood before anyone could yell. The rain in Port Alder doesn't just fall, it attacks. It hammered the windows of the copper lantern, a soundtrack of wet static against the cheap, tinny jazz piping through the speakers. The place was packed for a Tuesday. The air hung thick, a fog of old fry oil, damp wool, and the sour tang of spilled beer. Mara Quinn, was 24 years old and moving through that fog like a ghost with a death wish. My left arm burned, the muscles screaming from the weight of the oval tray. 6 plates, 2 ribeyes, 3 burgers, 1 blackened salmon, 6 opportunities for disaster between the kitchen pass and table 12. My shift had 3 hours left. Leo was with Mrs. Petrov, which meant I owed her another $30 I didn't have. The milk in our fridge was running low. My focus was a tightrope, and I was walking it over a canyon of debt. "Another round over here, sweetheart." I didn't look. I just nodded, the heavy tray wobbling. "One moment, sir." I pivoted around the server station, my sneakers skidding on a wet spot. I corrected, the plates clattering. "In a hurry, are we?" It was the man from table 9. He'd been loud all night, his face ruddy with booze. I tried to squeeze past his chair. He leaned out. "Hey, I'm talking to you." His hand, damp and hot, clamped around my free wrist. It wasn't violent, not really. It was casual. Entitled, that was the worst part. He grabbed me like he was grabbing a bread roll, but it broke my concentration. My balance, already precarious, was gone. The tray tilted, I tried to save it. I twisted my body, shifting the weight. The salmon plate slid first. It hit the edge of the tray, and then it was airborne for half a second before it connected with the worn wooden floor. The sound of shattering porcelain was obscene. It cut through the music, the chatter, the rain. The entire restaurant went silent. 100 eyes snapped to me, to the broken white ceramic, to the sad-looking fillet of fish cooling in a puddle of lemon butter sauce. I felt the blood rush from my face, a cold, prickling wave of humiliation. Across the room, I saw Trent Halvers, the night manager, at the host stand. His hands were gripping the reservation book, his knuckles white. I saw his nostrils flare. He took that deep, theatrical breath he always took before he tore a server apart in front of the customers. He loved this part. My throat closed. The cost of that plate was coming out of my tips. That was half a night's milk for Leo. I braced for the shout, but the shout never came. Instead, a chair scraped. It was a quiet sound, but in the dead silence, it was louder than the plate had been. From the darkest booth in the back corner, the one Trent always saved for special guests, a man stood up. I'd seated him earlier. I hadn't seen his face, just the silhouette of a man in an immaculate, expensive suit. Now, he moved into the dim yellow light. The suit was charcoal gray, so dark it seemed to drink the light around him. It fit him in a way I'd only seen in old movies. He wasn't big, not like a bouncer. He was built with an economy of motion, moving with a panther's deadly grace. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the plate. He walked directly to the bar, his footsteps making almost no sound on the floorboards. Trent's mouth was still open, the yell dying in his throat. The man slid a credit card onto the wet bar top. It was heavy, black metal. "Bill the broken plate," he said. His voice was low, gravelly, like stones shifting in a riverbed. It wasn't loud, but it filled the entire room. And apologized to her. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't shock. It was heavy, thick with something I couldn't name. Trent Halvers, who once made a busboy cry for using the wrong polish, just nodded. His face was pale. "Yes, sir." The man, Salvatore Giardina, finally turned. His gaze didn't land on me. It found the drunk at table 9, who was still sitting with his hand frozen in mid-air where my wrist had been. Salvatore didn't scowl. He didn't threaten. He just looked. He tilted his head, a slow, lazy motion, an expression of mild curiosity. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. The drunk's ruddy face went ashen. He began to stammer. I didn't. It was just He physically recoiled, sliding his chair back until it hit the wall. Another man, who had been sitting with Giardina, rose from the booth. He was huge, a mountain in a coat, but he moved like the other one silently. He stepped past me, picked up the drunk's chair, and placed it squarely back at the table. He took a napkin and wiped a smudge of beer from the man's water glass. Then he stepped back, clearing the path for me as if I were royalty. The spell was broken. People started talking, too low, too fast. I dropped to my knees. The shame was still there, hot and sharp, but something else was beneath it, defiance. I kept my back straight. I would not cry. Not here. My hands were shaking as I gathered the larger pieces of porcelain. I was thinking about Leo, about the 2-year-old sleeping in his crib, smelling like baby powder and innocence. I was thinking about how this world loved to break things. A shadow fell over me. I looked up through my hair. Salvatore Giardina was standing over me. He wasn't offering to help. He wasn't smiling in pity. He just watched me for a second, his eyes unreadable, dark as the harbor at midnight. Then he held out a clean, folded linen napkin. I stared at it, confused. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice just for me. I looked down. A small, sharp shard of ceramic had sliced across my palm. A bright red bead of blood welled up, stark against my skin. I hadn't even felt it. I took the napkin, my trembling fingers brushing his. His skin was warm. I pressed the linen to the cut, the white fabric turning red. "Thank you," I whispered. My voice was hoarse. He just nodded, a short, sharp dip of his chin. He turned and walked back to his booth, the crowd parting for him like he was a shark and they were minnows. The whispers started then, fluttering around the room. I heard the name, spoken like a curse, like a prayer. Giardina. The Giardina Syndicate. I hated that world. I hated the casual power, the fear they sold. Port Alder was drowning in it, and I was just trying to keep my head above the foul water. But as I finished cleaning the mess, my hand throbbing, I couldn't shake one. Persistent thought. Trent was still silent. The drunk was paying his bill, his hands shaking. And Salvatore Giardina was the only person in this entire, crowded, noisy restaurant who had stood up before anyone had a chance to yell at me. The rest of my shift was a blur. His party left an hour later. Dario Mott, the mountain, settled the bill. Trent told me, his voice strained, that the VIP in the back had paid for the broken plate and left a $300 tip for the server's trouble. It was more than my milk money. It was rent. I stared at the cash, feeling sick. I didn't want his money, but I took it. When I finally left at 2 a.m, the rain had eased to a cold drizzle. I walked the 6 blocks back to my apartment building, the concrete smelling of wet trash and the sea. The elevator in my building squealed and groaned, the metal cage rattling as it climbed to the 4th floor. I let myself into the small, 1-bedroom apartment. The only light was the dim glow of the cartoon whale nightlight by Leo's toddler bed. He was fast asleep, his small hand curled around his stuffed bear, his chest rising and falling in that perfect, steady rhythm of childhood. I stood there, my hand wrapped in the stained linen napkin, and just watched him breathe. The exhaustion of the night, of the last 2 years, washed over me, a weight so heavy it threatened to pull me under. I sank down onto the edge of his bed, careful not to wake him. I kissed his soft, warm hair. He was safe. He was all that mattered. The man in the charcoal suit had saved me from a moment of humiliation, but he was part of the sickness that made this city so hard to live in. I was on my own. I unwrapped the napkin, cleaned the cut properly, and put a cheap bandage on it. I looked back at my sleeping son. Tomorrow. I promised him silently. Tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow. I won't just be the woman who drops a plate. Tomorrow. I won't let anyone in this world have the power to humiliate me in front of my son. I would find a way. I had to. The morning promise I had made to Leo felt hollow by 7 a.m. The Graybridge apartments were designed to break promises. The radiator in the hallway clanged like a hammer on an anvil, and the water coming from our kitchen tap ran a sickly, rust-brown color for the first 2 minutes. Leo, oblivious, was happy. He was making vroom vroom noises with a small blue plastic car on the cracked linoleum. That sound, his joy, was the only clean thing in this place. That's a racket. Quinn. I flinched, spilling a little of the now clear water. Gant, the landlord, was outside my door. He didn't bother knocking, just yelled through the thin wood. "You keep that kid quiet, or the rent's going up another $50. This ain't a daycare." I saw the notice taped to my door. Another fake building inspection report, the date clearly typed over. The man was a slumlord vulture. I bit my tongue. The $300 from last night heavy in my pocket. It was not enough to leave. It was just enough to be a target. I ignored Gant and checked the mail slot. Bills, junk, and one official-looking envelope from the Bright Light Credit Company. I did not know the name. I tore it open while bouncing Leo on my hip. The words swam. Final notice. Delinquency. Asset seizure. The amount was astronomical, $12,000. It was for a loan taken out 6 months ago. The signature at the bottom of the copy was mine, except it was not. It was close. A clumsy forgery of my name, tied to an old debt of the father who had vanished a decade ago. They had found me. A loan shark, wearing the skin of a legitimate company. My stomach turned to ice. They knew where I lived. They knew my name. Before I could even process the letter, there was a knock. Not Gant's lazy fist. This was 3 short, hard raps, official. I looked through the peephole. 2 men. They wore matching navy blue windbreakers with a cheap-looking embroidered patch. Port Alder Dock District Order Service. I had never heard of it. I opened the door a crack, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you?" The taller one smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Ma'am, we're conducting residency and welfare checks. We need to see your childcare documentation." Leo peeked around my leg, holding his blue car. The men's eyes flicked right past him. They were not looking at my son. The tall one was looking at the cheap clock on my stove. The shorter one was scanning the hallway outside, his eyes lingering on the building's ancient security camera mounted near the stairwell. This was not about welfare. "I'll need to see your badges," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. The tall one's smile tightened. "We just need to see the papers, ma'am." Leo, sensing the tension, gripped my jeans. I stepped back, pulling him behind me. "I'm not showing you anything until I speak to my lawyer." The shorter man let out a sharp, barking laugh. "A lawyer in Graybridge. That's a good one." He pulled a slip of paper from his pocket and slid it through the crack. "We'll be back. Have your paperwork ready for your appointment." They turned and walked away, their bootsteps too heavy for the flimsy stairs. I picked up the slip. It was not an official city form. It was just a note for a compliance review. I locked the deadbolt, my heart hammering. I picked up Leo and held him tight, burying my face in his hair. He patted my cheek. "Okay, Mama." My phone buzzed on the counter, a number I did not recognize, a blocked ID. The message had only one line. "Do not open the door for anyone with a badge. They are not from the city." A chill went straight down my spine. I looked at the forged debt letter. I looked at the fake appointment slip. Someone was building a cage around me. The Copper Lantern was a different kind of chaotic that night. The Port Alder Maritime Guild was holding some kind of private auction dinner. The air was not just fry oil. It smelled of expensive cologne and wet, expensive wool. The dining room was filled with men in sharp suits, their faces slick and polished under the dim yellow lights. They were the men who owned the docks, the shipping lines, and the politicians who looked the other way. And he was there. In the same dark corner booth, Salvatore Giardina, he was with the mountain, Dario, again. They were not eating, just drinking espresso. I did not know his name then. I just knew he was the man who had stopped the room with a look. I avoided that corner. I told myself I was just busy, but I was afraid of the power, and afraid of the gratitude I still felt. He never looked at me, not once. I was just part of the furniture again, a ghost carrying plates. Until I passed the bar, a busboy had dropped an ice bucket, and a patch of floor near the service station was slick with melted water. My foot hit it. I did not fall, but my ankle twisted, and I stumbled, the heavy tray of drinks lurching. In that split second, I looked toward his booth. He was looking right at me. His eyes were locked on mine, but before I had even fully regained my balance, the mountain, Dario, was out of the booth and standing directly in my path, shielding me from the main dining room. He did not touch me. He just stood there, a solid wall, as if he had anticipated my slip and measured the exact distance he needed to move to block me from view. He bent down, pulled a bar towel from his pocket, and wiped the floor. "Careful," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. Then he was gone. Back in the booth, Salvatore was looking at the wall as if it had never happened. My nerves were shot. An hour later, Trent sent me to the walk-in freezer for more wine. Table 4, the Chardonnay, do not drop it. I pushed into the cold metal room, the fan roaring, the air was frigid, smelling of frozen fish and cardboard. I grabbed the wine, and as I turned, I bumped a large wooden crate stacked by the door. The label read, Aramar Sea Salt. The lid, which had been poorly nailed down, popped open an inch. I should have ignored it. I should have walked out. But I saw what was inside. It was not salt. It was a thin, metal document box. My curiosity, that fatal part of me, took over. I glanced back at the kitchen. No one was watching. I eased the lid open. Inside were ledgers, dozens of thin sheets like old-fashioned shipping manifests, but the columns were not for cargo. They were lists of dates, codes, and strange, hand-drawn symbols. It looked like a secret language. My first thought was Trent. He was always skimming, always running some small-time hustle. This felt bigger. I pulled the box out, intending to take it straight to his office. I would slam it on his desk and tell him I would not be part of whatever this was. I rounded the corner toward the back office. I heard his voice. He was on his cell phone, his voice a greasy whisper. "No, it is perfect. The whole guild is here. No one is watching the back." A pause. "The shipment goes tonight, Raven Key, Gate 3. It will be clear." My blood froze. "Yeah, I got the perfect cover," Trent snickered. "That clumsy waitress. The new one. Mara. If anyone finds the box before the pickup, I will say I caught her moving it. She will take the fall. Who is going to believe a single mom from Graybridge?" I ducked back, pressing myself against the wall, the cold metal box burning against my apron. He was going to frame me, the fake inspectors, the debt letter, and now this. It was all connected. They were not just building a cage, they were baiting a trap, and I was the bait. My survival instinct, the one I had honed since Leo was born, kicked in. It was sharp and cold and clear. I did not panic. I walked silently back toward the employee lockers. I pulled out my old, cracked smartphone. I opened the metal box, took one of the ledgers, and snapped a quick, blurry photo of a single page. Then I looked for a place to hide the box. I could not leave it. I could not put it back. My eyes landed on my locker. On the bottom shelf was Leo's diaper bag. Tucked inside was his favorite blue toy truck, the spare one I kept for emergencies. I looked at the truck. I looked at the box. What lawyer in Graybridge? Who is going to believe a single mom? They were right. No one would believe me. But I thought, as I shoved the thin metal box deep into the diaper bag and zipped it up, nobody ever checks a kid's toys. I put the bag back in the locker, slammed it shut, and walked back into the dining room, my hands perfectly steady. The auction crowd cleared out by midnight. The restaurant was dead. I had wiped the last table, my arms aching with a familiar, deep fatigue. My shift was over. I went to my locker, my knuckles brushing the cold metal. My hands were steady. The fear from this morning had burned away, leaving something hard and cold in its place. I opened the locker. I took the diaper bag. I unzipped the side pocket, past the spare diaper and the teething ring, and my fingers found the metal box. It was small, thin, light enough to be mistaken for nothing. I slipped it into the pocket of my worn jacket. I took the single photo I had, the blurry image on my phone, and transferred the actual paper, the one I had photographed, from the box to the thin space between my phone and its cheap plastic case. A single page. My insurance? I slung the diaper bag over my shoulder, ready to face the long walk to the bus stop. As I pushed open the kitchen door into the back alley, a shape blocked the exit. It was Dario, the mountain. He stood there, impassive, not looking at me. "Mister, Giardina requests a word," he said to the wall above my head, "on the porch." It was not a request. I followed him. The back porch was just a small, covered wooden platform where the servers took their smoke breaks. It overlooked a dark alley that smelled of the harbor and dumpsters. He was there, leaning against the railing, Salvatore Giardina. He was not in his suit jacket anymore, just the dark trousers and a crisp white shirt. The sleeves rolled up his forearms. I saw the edge of a dark, intricate tattoo on his left wrist. He was smoking a cigarette, the cherry glowing red in the dark. Dario did not stay. He melted back into the shadows of the kitchen doorway, a sentinel. The wind was brutal. It whipped off the water, cold and salty, tearing at my hair. It made the single bare bulb above the door swing, casting our shadows long and distorted. He took a long drag, the smoke vanishing instantly on the wind. He spoke first, his voice quiet, forcing me to lean in slightly to hear him over the gale. "The men who knocked on your door in Graybridge," he said, "they weren't officials." It was a statement, not a question. The message. He had sent the message. My heart, which had been so steady, gave a painful kick. I clutched the strap of my diaper bag. I kept my voice flat, cold. "I do not know you." He turned his head, finally looking at me. His eyes were dark, and the swinging light caught the planes of his face. All hard angles. "Good," he said. "Keep it that way. It's safer." The silence stretched. It was a negotiation. I was not a waitress anymore. I was something else. He was testing the locks. "The ferryman demands his fee twice," and he said, the words almost random, a line of harbor slang, a test. I did not pause. I did not blink. "Gate 3, I said. His stillness was absolute. He did not move, but the air around him changed. The mild curiosity was gone. His eyes darkened, became focused. He had seen a waitress. Now he was seeing a problem, or a piece on the board. He knew. In that instant that I knew about Raven Key. He knew I had the box. "You and your son," he said, his voice dropping, "need to be out of Graybridge. Tonight, I can have a car here in 5 minutes. A car. A safe place, an escape from Gant, from the fake inspectors, from the debt collectors. He was offering me a golden cage. The old, familiar pride, the only thing I had left that was truly mine, rose up, bitter and hot. "No," I said. "I will not exchange one oppressor for a benefactor. I am not for sale. Mr. Giardina." His lips twitched. It was not a smile, it was something else. Respect. "A benefactor," he mused, turning back to the railing. "That's not what this is." The kitchen door opened. Dario stepped out. He did not look at either of us. He placed something small and white on the weathered wooden rail. A plastic ID card. He placed it down and vanished again. I looked at the card. It had my name, my photo, but the title beneath it read Port Alder Child Protection Institute. It looked real. "That's a city agency that doesn't exist," Salvatore said, still not looking at me, "but the bank account tied to it does. As of an hour ago, your son, Leo, is receiving a full, backdated childcare stipend. The funds are already cleared. It's anonymous. It's clean. It's not a gift, Miss Quinn. It's an adjustment." I stared at the card. My hands were shaking. This was not a car or a fancy apartment. This was milk. This was medicine. This was a babysitter I could trust. This was a man pulling strings I did not even know existed. As my eyes were fixed on the card, a flicker of movement caught my attention in the alley below. In the deep shadow by the grease trap, a hand holding a small, black device with a single red recording light. It was Trent. He was filming us. Before I could even gasp, Salvatore, without turning, made a small, sharp gesture with his left hand, a flick of 2 fingers. On the roof of the restaurant opposite, a shadow detached itself from a ventilation unit. There was a sound, like a pebble skipping on pavement. The hand in the alley yelped. The small camera flew from his grasp and skittered into a dark, watery gutter. Trent scrambled after it, cursed, and ran. It was over in 2 seconds. "You're being framed for a different story," Salvatore said, as if commenting on the weather. "Trent was sent to get proof of you passing me a package, proof that you're the inside man." My blood ran cold. It was right. I had almost walked right into it. "He was going to frame me," I whispered, my voice raw. "He still is. He'll just say you were spooked. They'll come for you anyway." He finally stubbed out his cigarette on the railing, the sparks dying. "What did you find in the salt crate?" There it was, the real question. I reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers were numb. I pulled out the thin, metal box. The diaper bag on my shoulder suddenly felt impossibly heavy, a reminder of what I was protecting. I held the box out. He did not take it. "If you want to know why the wind is blowing backwards tonight," I said, my voice shaking but hard, "read this. This is what Trent was supposed to plant on me. This is what they'll come for." He took the box. His fingers brushed mine. They were warm, calloused. He did not open it. He just weighed it in his hand. He looked at me, his gaze analytical, dissecting me. "Why trust me? I'm the man in the dark corner. Miss Quinn, I'm the one they're afraid of." The words came out before I could stop them. They were the truest thing I had said all night. "Because you stood up when I broke the plate," I said, meeting his eyes. "The men who came to my door this morning wanted to see me weak. Trent wanted to see me humiliated. The drunk wanted to touch me. You just stopped the noise. People like you don't waste time on small things like that. You didn't do it for me. You did it because you don't like messes." He was quiet for a long time. The wind howled, pressing my thin jacket against my skin. "You're wrong," he said, his voice so low it was almost lost. "I did it for you." He took a step closer. He was not threatening. He was just there, a wall against the wind. "I will stand up again, Mara," he said, using my name for the first time. It sounded different in his mouth. "I will stand up every time anyone dares to yell at you." It was a promise, simple, absolute, and it was as warm and as dangerous as a blade hidden in velvet. He nodded once, a gesture of dismissal. The meeting was over. He turned to the kitchen door. Dario was there, holding it open. Salvatore walked past me. As he passed, the back of his hand brushed the back of mine. It was nothing. A ghost of a touch, but it was not an accident. A jolt, sharp and hot, shot straight up my arm, ending at the base of my neck. It was not sexual. It was pure, unfiltered electricity, a connection, a recognition. I saw him pause, just for a fraction of a second, in the doorway. He turned his head away from me, toward the darkness of the kitchen. But I saw the corner of his mouth lift, a smile so small, so rare, it almost did not exist. Then he was gone. I stood alone on the porch, the cold wind hitting me full force. I was clutching the fake ID card in one hand and my phone with its single, hidden page in the other. I was in deeper than I had ever imagined. Dawn broke over Raven Key, gray and oily. The harbor was already alive, the groaning of cranes and the shouts of longshoremen muffled by the fog. We were not at the harbor. We were parked 2 streets over in his old, dark Maybach. The car was immaculate but understated, a ghost from another era. It did not scream mafia, it whispered old money. Salvatore sat in the passenger seat, the thin metal box open on his lap. The single dome light cast deep shadows across his face as he studied the ledgers. I watched him, the diaper bag heavy on the seat between us. Leo was asleep in his car seat, his mouth open, his breathing the only peaceful sound in the world. "Aramar," Salvatore said, his voice a low rumble. He traced one of the coded lines with his finger. "This isn't just Trent's hustle. This is a corporate pipeline. What does it mean? It means Aramar sea salt is a ghost. This symbol here's. He tapped the ledger. It's the internal routing code for the Port Alder Commerce Authority. PACA. He paused, his eyes scanning the page. And this signature authorization, the one on every page, it belongs to Commissioner Jorah Pell. The name hit me like a physical blow. Pell was on billboards all over the city, smiling, shaking hands, promising a cleaner, safer Port Alder. He's the one, Salvatore said, closing the box. He's running a private, invisible toll booth on his own docks. He looked at me, his gaze sharp. And he's using men like Trent and companies like Brightlight Credit to create distractions and scapegoats. He had just connected every bad thing that had happened to me in the last 24 hours to one man. 2 hours later, I was a different kind of nervous. I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt up, hiding my face as I carried Leo toward the frosted glass doors of the Firgrove daycare. This was the place the adjustment stipend covered. It was clean. The walls were painted a soft yellow, and I could hear quiet classical music. It was a different universe from the church basement I'd been using. Leo, sensing my tension, wrapped his arms tight around my neck. "No, Mama, stay." My heart broke. It was the daily tearing. "I have to work, baby," I whispered, kissing his soft hair. The smell of him, like milk and sleep, was my anchor. "I'll be back right after. Be a good boy for the nice ladies." "Mommy, come back," he insisted, his little face crumpling. "I always come back. Leo." I handed him to the caregiver, a kind-faced woman who did not ask any questions. I forced myself to walk away, to not run back when he cried my name once. I pulled the hood lower. The surveillance camera above the door stared at me like a glass eye. I kept my head down and walked fast. I got to the Copper Lantern just before the lunch rush. The pit in my stomach was a cold, hard knot. It happened at 1:15. The restaurant was full. I was carrying a tray of iced teas. The front door opened and the bell jangled. It was Trent, but he was not alone. He was with the two men who had knocked on my door, the fake inspectors, and a third man, thin and weasel-faced, in a cheap suit, holding a briefcase. Trent pointed at me. He pointed right at me, a nasty, triumphant smile on his face. "That's her, Mara Quinn." The restaurant did not go silent. It kept buzzing. The weasel-faced man stepped forward, his voice high and reedy, designed to carry, "Mara Quinn, you are hereby served notice by the Brightlight Credit Company for failure to pay on a $12,000 loan. We are initiating asset seizure proceedings." People were turning. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. It was happening. The public humiliation, the trap. They were painting me as a broke, delinquent single mother, a thief. The man from Brightlight took a step toward me, reaching out as if to grab my arm. "You need to come with us." "No." The voice cut through the room. It was not Salvatore. It was me. The word was out before I could stop it, small but sharp. The man paused, surprised by my defiance. Trent sneered. "Oh, you're in trouble now, girlie." "Her bill," another voice said, deeper, colder, "is handled by me." Salvatore Giardina stood up from his booth. He had been there the whole time, in the same dark corner, completely unseen by me. He did not walk to the bar. He walked directly toward Trent and the debt collectors. "Yours," he said, his eyes locked on the weasel-faced man, "is not." The man from Brightlight, emboldened by Trent, made a fatal mistake. He saw a civilian, not a threat. He ignored Salvatore and reached for me again. "Look, mister, this is official business. The lady has to, He never finished the sentence. Dario, the mountain, moved with a speed that defied his size. He was not there, and then he was... His huge hand enveloped the debt collector's wrist. The man's eyes went wide. Dario did not punch him. He did not shove him. He simply bent. He applied pressure, folding the man's fingers back on themselves. There was no snap, just a soft, wet, crunching sound. The man from Brightlight opened his mouth. No sound came out. His face went dead white. His briefcase dropped, scattering papers. The restaurant was silent, utterly. That same heavy, terrifying silence from the night before. "I believe," Salvatore said quietly, standing just behind me, his presence a solid wall at my back, "that I am handling her affairs. Trent, you are fired." Trent's jaw dropped. "What you cannot... This is... your appel. Ha." "Get out of his restaurant," Dario rumbled, releasing the collector, who crumpled to his knees, clutching his hand. My restaurant," Trent stammered. Salvatore looked at Trent for the first time. "I bought the building 2 hours ago. The paperwork is filed. You're trespassing." Trent and the fake inspectors scrambled backward, dragging the whimpering debt collector with them. They fled, the bell on the door jangling wildly. Salvatore looked at the shocked diners. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, his voice calm. "Your lunches are on the house." He turned to me. I was shaking so hard the iced teas were rattling on the tray. "Your shift is over," he said. He took the tray from my hands. His fingers brushed the bandage on my palm. "Go get your bag. The car is out back." This time I did not argue. The drive was silent. He took me to a nondescript office building downtown, Civic East Legal Aid. Inside, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair named Rhea Lind was waiting. She did not ask about my day. She did not ask about Salvatore. She just put a piece of paper in front of me, a copy of the loan agreement. "Is this your signature, Miss Quinn?" "No," I whispered. "That's all I need." She signed a different form with a flourish, stamped it, and handed me a copy. "The debt is fraudulent and has been voided. Bright Light Credit is now under formal investigation for predatory practices." Just like that, a $12,000 monster slain by a stamp. That night, he did not take me back to Greybridge. He took me to the Berengar, a tall, older building overlooking the river. The lobby was marble and quiet. We rode a silent elevator to the penthouse. He unlocked a heavy wooden door. "A safe apartment," he said. "No one knows I own it." The apartment was beautiful, warm, filled with books, but I walked straight to the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator. It was full: organic milk, eggs, apple juice, fruit, the exact brand of yogurt Leo liked. I turned, my heart hammering with a new kind of suspicion. In the living room, by a small, unlit fireplace, was a basket. I walked over. Inside was a wooden train set, a book about dinosaurs, and a small, blue plastic car, identical to the one Leo had at home. "How?" I whispered, turning to face him. "How did you know?" I felt violated, watched. "You spied on my son. You had people watching us." He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He did not get defensive. He did not apologize. "I listened," he said, his voice quiet. "When I had you brought to the lawyer's office, I had Dario take your neighbor, the old woman, Mrs. Elmo, shopping. She complained that Leo was a picky eater, that he only liked the apple cinnamon yogurt, that he loved dinosaurs, and that he lost his favorite blue car last week at the park." He met my gaze. "There is a difference. Mara, spying is for enemies. Listening is for..." He stopped. "It's just listening." I did not know what to say. The anger drained away, leaving me unsteady. His phone vibrated on the counter. He looked at it. His face hardened. "It's Elmo," he said. He put it on speaker. "Mr. S., they're here." The old woman's voice was panicked. "They bust down her door, Mara's door, men in masks. They're eating the whole place apart." I clapped my hand over my mouth. My apartment, my home. Salvatore was perfectly calm. He took the phone. "Is she with you?" "Yes, she's safe down here with me." "Good, stay there. Lock your door. They won't find anything." He hung up, and he looked at me. "Pell's men, from Paca. They're looking for the ledgers." "But they'll tear up Leo's room, his things." "They're in the wrong place," Salvatore said, his voice flat. "They think you're a frightened waitress who would hide it under her mattress." He nodded toward the metal box on the counter. "They're looking for that." He paused. "But they're not looking for all of it. The last piece is still here." He meant my insurance, the single page I had kept. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking again. I pulled the cheap plastic case off. The folded paper was there. I opened it. I stared at the strange symbols, the codes, the dates. My eyes drifted from the paper to Salvatore's hand, which was resting on the counter. His sleeves were still rolled up from the restaurant. The intricate tattoo on his left wrist was visible. It was not just a swirl of ink. It was a design, like an old mariner's compass. I looked closer. The points of the compass were not letters. They were small, stylized marks, a dot here, a crescent there, a cluster of 3 tiny pinpricks of ink arranged in a triangle. I looked back at the ledger sheet in my hand. At the bottom of the page, next to Pell's authorization, was a small, hand-drawn symbol, a stamp of approval, a final sign-off. It was a cluster of 3 tiny dots arranged in a triangle. The room spun. The page in my hand was not just a shipping ledger. It was a kill list, a payoff sheet, and the proof. The proof came from his own skin. "This," I whispered, holding up the paper, my finger on the symbol. "It matches you." He looked at the paper. He looked at his wrist. His eyes did not darken with rage. They went cold, a bleak, Arctic cold. He was not angry at me. He was not angry at Pell. It was the sudden, terrible realization of betrayal. "That tattoo," he said, his voice a razor's edge. "It's a family crest, a compass. Only 4 people in this world have it." He knew, in that instant he knew, the traitor, the one who had tied Jorah Pell to the Giardina family, was not a stranger. The leak was not a leak, it was a flood. And the counterattack he had to plan, the one to save me, to save Leo, had to be waged against his own house. The silence in the penthouse stretched, thick and heavy, the revelation of the tattoo, the implication of betrayal from within his own family, hung in the air between us, suffocating. Salvatore had been on the phone for almost an hour, standing on the far side of the living room, his back to me. His voice was a low, controlled murmur of Italian, sharp and decisive. I had put Leo to bed in the portable crib that had been waiting in the guest room. The storm outside was growing, the wind rattling the massive windows. The city lights flickered, threatening to go out. I sat on the sofa, feeling useless, my hands clasped in my lap. I looked down and noticed a thin, red scratch across my knuckles. Probably from the dive I took in the restaurant. I had not even felt it. I found a first aid kit in the bathroom. It was not a standard kit. It was stocked for serious injuries. I pulled out a small gauze pad and a bottle of antiseptic. As I sat back down at the kitchen island, Salvatore ended his call. The click of the phone dropping into its cradle was impossibly loud. He walked over, his face a mask of cold control. He watched me awkwardly try to clean the scratch with my shaking left hand. "Here." He took the gauze pad from my fingers. His touch was not gentle, but it was incredibly steady. He took my right hand, turning it over. He was methodical, efficient. I felt the cold sting of the antiseptic. His grip was firm as he held my hand still. His thumb rested on the inside of my wrist, directly over my pulse. I froze. My heart was hammering, a frantic bird in a cage, and I knew he could feel it. He could feel every terrified, exhausted beat. He held my gaze, his own eyes dark and unreadable. He finished cleaning the small wound and wrapped a bandage around my knuckles. He did not release my hand immediately. "My foster mother," he said, his voice quiet, the sudden shift jarring me. "She worked the docks, right at Raven Key. She taught me how to read the manifests." He looked past me, at the rain lashing the glass. "She used to say that power isn't the guy who yells the loudest. It's not the man who throws the first punch." I thought of him in the restaurant, stopping Trent's yell before it began. "She said real power," he continued, "is knowing when not to use it, knowing when to just stand still and let the world break itself on you." He looked back at me, and the corner of his mouth lifted. It was not a smile. It was something smaller, rarer. A faint shadow of a dimple appeared on his left cheek and was gone just as fast. It was the first time I'd seen the cold calculation leave his eyes. "I'm scared," I whispered, the admission tearing out of me. "I'm scared of this." I gestured to the beautiful apartment, the full refrigerator, the lawyer who made my problems disappear. "I don't want to be in your debt, Salvatore. I don't want to be bought." His expression hardened slightly, not in anger, but in clarification. "You cannot be bought, Mara." His voice was low, certain. "I knew that the second you refused my car, this is not a purchase." He paused, searching for the word. "It is an exchange. You brought me the truth. You showed me the rot in my own house, something I was too blind to see. That is a gift I can't repay. So I give you what I can. Safety. It is not a debt. It's ballast. We are keeping each other steady." Before I could answer, a small, fretful cry came from the bedroom. "Mama!" I tensed, rising from the stool. "Leo!" "I'll go," he said, holding up a hand. "He'll be scared. He doesn't know you." "He's fine," Salvatore said simply. He walked toward the bedroom. I followed, hovering in the doorway, my heart pounding. Leo was standing in the crib, his face flushed with sleep, his small fists rubbing his eyes. "Mama," he cried, his voice thick. Salvatore did not turn on the overhead light. He just walked to the side of the crib, a large, dark shadow in the dim glow from the hallway. "Hey, boss," he murmured. Leo's cry hitched, his eyes widening in confusion. "It's okay," Salvatore said, his voice stripped of all its gravel, all its edge. It was just calm. "It's just the rain. Big storm." He did not just grab him, he reached in, letting Leo see his hands. "You're all right." He scooped my son up, Leo, still more asleep than awake, instinctively wrapped his arms around Salvatore's neck and buried his face in the crook of his shoulder. Salvatore held him high and secure, one large hand splayed across his small back. He began to pace the room, a slow, steady, walking rhythm. He patted Leo's back, a gentle, hypnotic motion. "Just thunder," he murmured. "Go back to sleep." He did it like a man who had done it 1,000 times. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation. I stood in the doorway, my hand pressed to my mouth, the last stubborn wall of my suspicion, the one I had held onto as my only defense, did not just crack. It dissolved. It washed away. I was watching a mafia don, a man whose tattoo was linked to a criminal conspiracy, gently rock my child back to sleep. After 5 minutes, Leo's breathing was deep and even. Salvatore carefully laid him back in the crib, tucked the blanket around his shoulders, and walked back out, pulling the door almost shut. He found me in the living room. I had moved to the window, watching the city lights blur behind the curtain of rain. He came to stand beside me, not touching. We stood in silence for a long moment, the only sounds the storm outside and the quiet, static hiss of the baby monitor on a nearby table. "He trusts you," I said, my voice thick. "He's a good judge of character," Salvatore replied. I turned to face him. He turned to face me. The space between us, which had been filled with tension and fear, was now something else. It was charged. It was the same electric hum from the alley, but now it had nowhere to go. He lifted his hand, his movements slow. He did not touch my face, not right away. He brushed the hair back from my temple, his fingers grazing my skin. "You are," he started, his voice rough. "You're extraordinary, Mara." My breath hitched. My entire body felt heavy, expectant. He moved with that same deliberate slowness, giving me every possible second to pull away. His other hand came up, not to grab, but to rest. He cupped the back of my neck, his thumb finding the sensitive hollow just below my ear. He was careful, his touch respectful of my space, even as he claimed it. He leaned in. His forehead came to rest against mine. I closed my eyes. I could feel his breath on my lips. "May I?" he whispered. The question broke me. It was not a demand. It was not a taking. It was permission. I could not find my voice. I just gave a single, small, shaky nod. His lips met mine. It was not the hungry, desperate kiss I had read about. It was a question. It was tentative, impossibly soft, a brushing of warmth against the cold fear I had lived with for so long. He was tasting, asking, waiting. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. My lips parted slightly under his. That was the only answer he needed. The kiss changed. It deepened, but it was still slow. It was not rushed. It was a deliberate, thorough exploration. It was a kiss that promised safety and threatened danger all at once. The taste of him was clean, like the rain, with the faintest trace of coffee and something uniquely him. My hands, which had been clenched at my sides, rose. I did not grab him. I laid them flat against his chest, against the fine wool of his suit jacket. I felt the solid, steady beat of his heart beneath my palm. It was not racing. It was a slow, powerful thrum. He pulled me closer, closing the last inch between us. His arm slid around my waist, holding me firm. The kiss became a claim. The rain hammered the glass, a frantic drumbeat that masked the sound of my own heart. The city lights smeared and blurred, a neon backdrop to the warmth that was spreading through my veins, chasing out the cold. I tilted my head, my fingers curling, gripping the lapels of his jacket. I felt the solid muscle of his shoulders, the heat of his skin. We broke apart, but only inches. He rested his forehead against mine again. We were breathing the same air, his breath warm and quick against my skin. His eyes were dark, intense, pupils blown wide. A sharp crackle of static came from the table. The green light on the baby monitor flared to life. A loud, sleepy, snuffly sigh came through the speaker as Leo turned over in his crib. The spell shattered. A breathless, half-hysterical laugh bubbled up out of my chest. I saw Salvatore's eyes crinkle at the corners. He pulled back, and a low chuckle rumbled in his chest. The moment was gone, but it was not lost. It was just paused. We were not teenagers. We were two adults, and a child was sleeping in the next room. Salvatore did not let me go, but his hands moved from my waist to my shoulders, his grip grounding. His smile faded, replaced by that vow-like intensity. "I am a dangerous man, Mara," he whispered, and his voice was raw. "I have to be for my world, but I swear to you, I will never be a danger to you or to him." It was a promise that settled deep in my bones. "Don't promise that," I whispered, looking up at him. "You cannot control the world you live in. It's not safe." "I am not promising to control the world," he said, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. "I am promising to control myself." That distinction was everything. It was not a lie. It was not a fantasy. It was a commitment based on ironclad discipline. It was the most believable, most terrifying, and most wonderful promise I had ever heard. I stepped forward into the space he offered and wrapped my arms around his waist. I rested my head against his chest, right over his steady heartbeat. I felt his arms enclose me, one hand splayed across my back, the other coming up to cradle the back of my head. It was not a lover's embrace, not yet. It was the embrace of a fortress, a shield. We stood there for a long time, in the middle of the dark room, the storm raging outside. I listened to the rain, and I listened to the quiet, static breathing of my son. The heat of the kiss was still on my lips, but the warmth of the embrace was seeping into my very soul. I was safe. For the first time in my life, I was completely safe. And that was the most dangerous feeling of all. The safe house became a war room. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and unnervingly bright. Rhea Lind, the silver-haired lawyer, had set up a command center on the large mahogany dining table. She had the original metal box, my single hidden ledger page, and a stack of legal pads. Dario was on a laptop, his massive fingers flying over the keys with silent speed. Leo was in the living room, building a wobbly tower with his new wooden blocks, the picture of innocence in the eye of the hurricane. Salvatore stood at the window, a cup of untouched coffee in his hand. staring at the harbor. He had not slept. The cold, controlled mask was back in place, but I could see the tightness around his eyes, the rigid line of his jaw. He was a spring coiled to the breaking point. "Here it is," Rhea said, tapping the ledger page with her pen. "The Aramar sea salt shipments are a ghost fleet, but the dates are real. Every major shipment coincides with the annual Harbor Light Festival." "Security is lax," Salvatore said, his back still to us. "The port is full of tourists, private yachts. The harbor patrol is busy managing the parade, not checking manifests." "Exactly," Rhea said. "Pell signs off, but he's not the last signature. Every shipment has a secondary approval." She pointed to a scrawl at the bottom. "Soren Ilian, port supervisor." "Ilian is Pell's dog," Dario rumbled from his laptop, not looking up. "He runs the Paca Reserve Fund." He clicked a few keys, and a complex spreadsheet filled the screen. "It's a legal slush fund, meant for emergency port maintenance. It's where the money goes." He typed in another command. "I've been tracking the disbursements from the fund. Pell and Ilian are moving millions, but they're not the ones balancing the books. The accounting, it's too good. It's clean." "Who?" Salvatore asked, his voice flat. Dario paused. This was the moment. "The access logs for the fund's accounting are firewalled, but I got through. The digital fingerprints on the final ledgers, they belong to Giovanni." The name dropped into the room like a stone. Salvatore did not move. He did not turn. The only sound was Leo clapping his hands as his block tower fell. "Gio," Salvatore said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, a confirmation of the betrayal he already felt in his bones. My mind raced. Gio. I did not know the name, but something was pulling at my memory, something from the very beginning. "Wait," I said, my voice quiet. I walked over to the table and picked up the voided, fraudulent debt letter from Bright Light Credit. It had been sitting in my jacket pocket for 2 days. "Rhea, you said this company was part of it, a distraction." "It is a shell, funded by the same Paca slush fund," she said. I stared at the letterhead. It was cheap paper, but it had been run through an embosser, trying to look official. In the top corner was a small, raised logo, a lifebuoy. But it was flawed. There was a small diagonal tear in the design, a nick in the embossing plate, a lifebuoy with a gash. I looked up, my eyes finding Salvatore. "When I was at the restaurant, the first night, the drunk, you were in the corner booth with Dario." "Yes," he said, his voice wary. "There was another man. He came in later. He spoke to you. He had a tattoo on his neck, just behind his ear." Salvatore finally turned. His face was pale, his eyes black holes. "I remember thinking it was strange," I said, my voice shaking as the pieces clicked. "It was a small lifebuoy, and it had a tear in it, a scar, right through the middle. It's the same as the logo on the debt letter." Salvatore closed his eyes. "Giovanni," Dario said, his voice heavy with a sorrow that mirrored his boss's. "His first boat was the Annalise. She sank in a storm off the Cape. He was the only survivor. He has the ship's lifebuoy, the one that saved him, tattooed on his neck, with a tear in it, for the men he lost. Giovanni, the man with the sad tattoo, the man who had been laughing with Salvatore in the booth, his right hand, his friend." Salvatore opened his eyes. The coldness was gone. What replaced it was a profound, silent grief, a pain so deep it was structural. "When I was 18, he said, his voice hollow, "I was stupid. I picked a fight with 3 sailors on the wharf. One of them pulled a knife." He unconsciously touched a spot on his abdomen. "I was on the ground. Gio took the knife from me. He tackled the man. It almost cut his arm off." He looked at me, the confession raw in his eyes. He was the one who carried me to the doctor. He was the one who told my foster mother I'd fallen on a winch. He has been my most trusted man for 20 years, my family. The betrayal was not just business, it was blood. The silence held for a full minute. Then Salvatore walked to the table. The grief vanished, replaced by a frightening, Arctic calm. The king was back on the throne. "He's been playing me," Salvatore said. "He uses Pell to run the money, and he uses my organization, my name, my routes as the shield, and he was setting you up, Mara, to be the final piece. The corrupt Giardina operative he could expose to Pell, making him a hero just as he was robbing Pell blind." "He's cleaning house," Rhea said. "He and Pell are planning to seize control of the Sable Dock warehouse bidding. It's the last deepwater property. The auction is in 5 days." "Then that's the trap," Salvatore said. "Gio wants the ledgers. He thinks you have them. He'll need them to frame you and to blackmail Pell later." "So we give them to him," I said. Salvatore looked at me. "The box," I said, pushing it across the table, "and my last page, we use them as bait. At the Sable Dock auction, we leak that I'm trying to sell the evidence." "Gio will never show," Salvatore said. "He'll send his men." "He'll show for me," I insisted. "I'm the loose end. I'm the clumsy waitress who saw too much. He'll come to clean up the mess himself. He'll have to—" Salvatore's face hardened into a mask of absolute refusal. "No, I will not put you in a room with him. I will not use you as bait. Dario will find him. We will handle this." "Handle this how?" I shot back, the adrenaline making me bold. "The way you handled the debt collector, a show of force, guns. That's what he's expecting. He knows how you think, Salvatore. He's been at your side for 20 years. "I will not," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Put you in the line of fire. It is not negotiable. Mara, you are out. You and Leo are leaving the city tonight." "No." I slammed my hand on the table. The blocks in the other room clattered as Leo, startled, knocked them over. We both froze. I lowered my voice, but the intensity only grew. "You don't get it. You are a shield. You're brilliant at it. You shielded me from Trent. You shielded me from the debt, but you cannot shield me from this. The only way out is through. I gave you my word." "I don't want your word," I cried, my voice breaking. "I want this to be over. I don't want to be Mara Quinn, the woman you're protecting. I want to be Mara Quinn, just me." I pointed toward the guest room, where Leo had started to whimper. "Look at him. Salvatore, if you go after Gio with guns, you start a war. And even if you win, we will spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Your solution means running. It means Leo grows up in apartments like this, hiding, always hiding." I walked over to him, standing so close I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "I won't let my son grow up running. This ends, but it doesn't end with bullets. It ends with paper. It ends with the truth. It ends clean." He stared at me, his eyes searching mine. The argument was over. He saw the truth in my words. He was a man of violence, but he was protecting a woman who saw a different path, a better one. He gave a single, slow nod, the surrender, the acceptance. "You're not a shield, Mara," he whispered, his voice rough with a new respect. "You're a scalpel. You see where to cut." He turned back to the table. All business, the plan, our plan, came together quickly. It would be a two-pronged attack. "Gio and Pell are expecting a street war," Salvatore said. "We'll give them one, or the illusion of one. Dario and I will leak that we're moving against Pell's assets at Warehouse 17. We'll draw their muscle, their guns, to the wrong side of the harbor." "A diversion," Rhea said, a sharp smile on her face. "And while the wolves are chasing the decoy," I said, "Rhea and I go to the real meeting." "Not just you," Rhea said, tapping her phone. "We bring in the Port Alder Integrity Bureau, the PIB. I have a contact there, a man who has been trying to build a case against Pell for years. We leak the evidence through a press escrow. We make it public. We make it so clean, so bright, that they cannot use violence to cover it up." "It's smart," Dario rumbled, for the first time looking impressed. "A pincer move. One side dirty, one side clean." "They'll be caught in the middle," Salvatore said. His eyes found mine. The trust in them was absolute. Rhea looked at the calendar on the wall. The Sable Dock warehouse auction is the night of the full port inventory. Then that's the deadline, Salvatore said. The clock starts now. 5 days, I whispered. 5 days to take down a king, a commissioner, and a traitor. 5 days to win our lives back. The Harbor Mile night market was a sensory assault, a wall of noise, neon and steam. Thousands of people crammed the pier, shouting over the sizzle of food stalls, the bark of carnies, and the blare of tinny music. It was the perfect place to hide a transaction. It was the perfect place to stage an execution. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. I had a baseball cap pulled down low, the brim shadowing my eyes. In my thin messenger bag, I carried the empty metal box, the real evidence. The single ledger page and the encrypted USB drive containing all of Ria's findings was tucked into the lining of my jeans. A tiny, hard rectangle pressed against my skin. The box in my bag had a tracker in it. I was the bait. Ria was 20 feet away, dressed in a severe gray pantsuit, a clipboard in her hand. She looked like an annoyed contractor, tapping her foot, checking her watch. She was our eyes, and she was the link to the real PAIB. The plan was simple. I was here to sell the evidence to a nervous low-level player. Gio and Pell would be monitoring. Salvatore and Dario were miles away at Warehouse 17, staging a loud, aggressive diversion, a fake raid on one of Pell's ghost shipments. They were drawing the guns, leaving the paper trail for me and Ria. A hand, warm and heavy, landed on my shoulder. "Quinn, you made it!" I flinched, my breath catching. I turned. Gio Valley, and he was smiling, his eyes crinkling at the corners, radiating warmth. He looked like the uncle who always slipped you a $20 bill at Christmas. The scar on his neck, the torn lifebuoy, was stark under the neon. "Mr. Valley," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Please, Gio, you look like you're about to jump out of your skin, kid." He chuckled, a deep, pleasant sound. "Let's get out of this mess. Too many eyes." His hand moved to the small of my back, a gesture that was half comfort, half coercion. He began to steer me away from the main thoroughfare, away from the light. He guided me toward a dark maze of stacked shipping containers, a service alley shielded from the thousands of potential witnesses. The skin on the back of my neck went cold. This was wrong. As he pushed me forward, a bank of spotlights flared to life on a temporary stage built over the water. Commissioner Jorah Pell stepped up to the microphone, his arms spread wide, his smile blinding. "Friends, partners, welcome." His voice boomed over the crowd, echoing off the water. "Tonight, I am proud to announce the initiative that will define our future, the Clean Port Initiative." The crowd cheered. I felt sick. Pell was laundering his reputation at the same time he was laundering his money. I glanced back, and I saw them, men in the dark blue Paca windbreakers. Not the two who had come to my apartment. Dozens. They were not watching Pell. They were facing the crowd, forming a loose, disciplined perimeter. They were not security. They were a blockade. My feet slowed. "Gio, I don't—" "It's all right," he said, his voice soothing. "They're just here for the commissioner. We're almost there." He shoved me, gently but firmly, into the pitch-black mouth of the alley between two towering stacks of containers. A single, flickering bulb high above cast more shadows than light. It was a blind spot, a kill box. He was right behind me. "You're protecting me from the crowd?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Something like that. Quinn—" A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness at the far end of the alley. It was not Gio's contact. It was Salvatore. He was not in a suit. He was dressed in dark pants and a fitted black jacket, built for silence. He was supposed to be at Warehouse 17. He was supposed to be miles away. Gio did not even flinch. The kind, uncle-like smile finally vanished, replaced by a look of profound disappointment. "Salvatore, you were told to stand down. This is business. This is not for you." "She is not your business, Gio," Salvatore said. His voice was not human. It was the sound of iron scraping stone. She is a loose end, Gio said, his voice hardening, losing all its warmth. And you, Capo, you are a fool. You're letting a 24-year-old waitress cloud your judgment. You're sentimental. That's why you're finished. She's family, Salvatore said, taking one slow step toward us. Gio laughed. It was a short, ugly sound. Family, you think this is family? In one blindingly fast motion, his arm snaked around my chest, but he did not grab my arm. His hand clamped around my throat. It was not a punch. It was not a violent choke. It was a grip of pure, terrifying control. His thumb pressed down, just below my jaw, finding the artery. The world did not go black, but it grayed at the edges. He held me easily, his arm a steel bar, pulling me back against his chest. I was a shield. "Stop," Salvatore commanded. I saw his face. The man I had kissed, the man who had held my son, was gone. His eyes were not dark anymore. They were flat, cold, and fractured, like a sheet of ice hit with a hammer. "You're emotional. Sal, look at you," Gio sneered, his fingers tightening. I gagged. "You came here to protect her. Now you get to watch her die." He looked at Salvatore. "Now, give me the real box. And the page, the one you taught me to always keep as insurance." Salvatore took another step, his hands open at his sides. "The box is empty," he said. "Do not lie to me. The girl has it. Where are the papers?" "Where you taught me." Salvatore's voice dropped to a lethal growl. "Never keep all your eggs in one basket." A sound, a sharp, dry crack. It was not a firecracker. It was too clean. A spark exploded on the container wall, inches from my head. The shriek of metal was deafening. I screamed. "Sniper." Salvatore did not hesitate. He did not think. He reacted. He was not a man. He was a projectile. He crossed the 10 feet of gravel in a single, explosive bound. "No," Gio shouted, realizing the plan had changed. Salvatore hit me. He hit me like a linebacker, his shoulder connecting with my stomach, driving every last bit of air from my lungs. His body was a solid wall, wrapping around me, shielding me. We went down, smashing into the filthy gravel. His entire weight was on top of me, pinning me, protecting me. I heard the crack again, and the scree of the bullet hitting the metal exactly where we had been standing. High above, there was a different sound, a crash of metal, a pop, and a human yell. Cut short, the single flickering bulb above us died, plunging the alley into absolute darkness. Dario. And he had found the sniper. He had taken out the perch. The alley became pandemonium. Whistles, shouts. People from the market, drawn by the gunshot, were screaming. "PAB, please do not move!" Blue and red lights flooded the alley entrance. Men in tactical vests swarmed in. But they were not one team. "PAIB, hands up. Paca security, secure the perimeter." Pell's men, they poured in from the other side, not to make arrests, but to control the scene. The two forces slammed into each other. It was a brawl, a three-way war between the PAIB, Pell's private army, and the shadows of Gio's men. In the chaos, Rhea, on the outside, saw the PAIB signal. She hit her phone. On the massive jumbotron above Pell's stage, his smiling face vanished. It was replaced by a high-resolution scan of a document, my ledger page, the one from my phone case, the one showing the Paca logo and Gio's compass. The crowd stopped screaming. They just stared. Salvatore rolled off me, grabbing my arm, pulling me up. "Go to Rhea!" He shoved me toward the flashing lights, toward a uniformed PAIB officer. But his eyes were not on me. They were fixed on the darkness at the other end of the alley. Gio was gone. He had used the blackout to slip away. Salvatore shoved me at the cop. "Her protector, she's the witness?" He did not wait for an answer. He vaulted over a stack of empty fish crates, a shadow chasing a ghost. I looked past the brawl, past the flashing lights. I saw him, Gio, running, his suit jacket flapping. He was heading for the old skeletal iron bridges that connected the commercial docks. Salvatore was 20 yards behind him, closing the distance, his feet silent on the metal. They stopped in the middle of the highest gangplank, slick with mist under the cold harbor lights. Gio turned, breathing hard. Salvatore stopped, 10 feet from him. 2 men who had been family, 2 men who had shared blood and secrets for 2 decades. They stood, facing each other. There were no words. There did not need to be. The air between them crackled with 20 years of loyalty and one unforgivable betrayal. The wind on the iron bridge was a howl, a living thing trying to tear them from the rusted metal. Below, the flashing blue and red lights painted the chaotic scene Pell, his face a mask of disbelief, being forced to his knees by the PAIB. The crowd was a roar, a sea of faces illuminated by the jumbotron that still displayed Pell's crimes. But up here, it was silent. Gio Valli stood, his chest heaving, his expensive suit ruined. He faced Salvatore. "She's watching," Gio said, his voice almost conversational. Though he had to shout over the wind, he nodded toward the dock, where I was standing, a PAIB officer at my side. "You won't shoot me, not in front of her." Salvatore stood, his black jacket plastered to his frame by the mist. He had a gun in his hand, low at his side. I had not even seen him draw it. He looked at Gio. He looked at me. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Salvatore clicked the safety back on and lowered the weapon. He did not holster it. He just let it hang, his hand open. A choice. "You're right," Salvatore said, his voice carried. "A blade in the wind." Gio laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You're soft. She made you soft." He reached into his jacket pocket. "This whole thing, Pell, the money, it was just business. But you and her," he shook his head, "that's a liability." He pulled out a small, oilskin-wrapped package. "This is what Pell really wants. The client list, the real ledger, everything." He held it out over the churning black water. "You want it, come and get it." Before Salvatore could move, Gio tossed it. It spun, end over end, toward the waves. "No!" I screamed. I did not think. I broke away from the stunned officer. Running, my feet pounding on the pier, I launched myself at the railing, my arms stretched out. The package hit the water, but a thin, tough nylon cord was attached to it. Gio still held the other end. I did not grab the package. I lunged and caught the cord, my fingers closing around it. It snapped taut. The force, combined with my lunge, slammed my right arm against a rusted steel girder. A fresh, searing pain shot from my wrist to my shoulder. My bandaged knuckles from the night before split open. But I held on. The line cut deep into my palm, but I did not let go. "Pull it up, Mara," Salvatore yelled. Below, the crowd roared as Jorah Pell was led away in cuffs. The balance of power in Port Alder had just shattered. Gio stared at me, his face unreadable. Then he looked at Salvatore. "You lack the excuse, Sal," Gio said, his voice soft now. He pulled a long, thin knife from his belt. It was not a brawler's weapon. It was an assassin's tool. He lunged. It was not a move to kill. It was a test. A final question. The blade whipped through the air, aimed not at Salvatore's heart, but at his face. Salvatore did not flinch. He did not move. He just stood there. The blade stopped. The razor-sharp tip, honed to a needle point, rested a 1/4 inch from Salvatore's cheek. It was so close it snagged a single strand of his hair. "Why?" Gio whispered, his arm trembling with the strain. "Why not finish it? I betrayed you. I tried to kill her. You have every excuse." Salvatore looked at the man who had been his brother. His eyes were not cold. They were not angry. They were just empty of the old life. "Because I have a reason not to," Salvatore said. He looked past Gio, his gaze finding me as I struggled to my feet, clutching the precious, dripping package to my chest. "I have a reason to stop." It was the first time in his life he had chosen not to take revenge. He was choosing my way. He was choosing the clean way. Gio's face crumpled. He saw it. He saw the shift. He saw the man Salvatore was. and the man he was becoming. He saw what I had given him, and he saw, in that instant, everything he had just lost. The knife clattered from his fingers, ringing on the iron grate. Gio Valli, the man who had been Salvatore's shadow for 20 years, just shrugged. He seemed tired. He gave Salvatore a final, sad, knowing look. Then he turned and took one step back, into the shadows at the end of the bridge. "Now, gentlemen." Rhea Lynn's voice was crisp. Cutting through the wind, she stood there, flanked by 2 PAIB officers. Gio just held out his wrists. It was over. No blood spilled by Salvatore's hand. It was 3 a.m. when we got back to the Berengar. Dario had stayed behind to manage the legal fallout. Leo was fast asleep, having been watched by one of Rhea's trusted people. The penthouse was silent. The adrenaline from the night, the terror, the victory, all of it was vibrating under my skin. I was still clutching the oilskin package. Salvatore took it from my numb fingers and placed it on the table. My right hand was a ruin, the cut from the plate, the scrape from the container, and now the deep, burning rope burn from the cord. It was bleeding freely. "Sit," Salvatore said. His voice was rough. He pushed me gently onto a kitchen stool and went to the bathroom. He came back with the medical kit. He said nothing. He took my hand, his grip impossible steady. He unwrapped the ruined bandage, his jaw tight. He cleaned the new wounds, his touch methodical, but beneath the efficiency. His fingers were trembling, just slightly. I looked at his wrist, the dark ink of the compass, my bloody, bandaged hand on top of his tattooed one, the woman who got yelled at and the man who stood up. When he was finished, he did not let go. He just held my hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. I looked up at him, and he was staring at me, his eyes dark, all the masks gone. He was not a Don. He was not a killer. He was just a man who had looked into the abyss and chosen to step back. "You're safe," he whispered. "We're safe," I corrected. He leaned in, and this time there was no hesitation. This was not the soft question from the night before. This was a statement. This was a drowning man finding air. His lips claimed mine. It was a desperate, hungry kiss, tasting of the cold night, of salt and steel, and a profound, bone-deep relief. It was not gentle. It was a collision. My good hand came up, my fingers tangling in his damp hair. Pulling him closer, his other arm snaked around my waist, lifting me from the stool, pressing my body against his. There was no thought. There was only this, the frantic beat of his heart against my chest, the scrape of his stubble against my skin, the heat of his mouth. It was a kiss that lasted for an eternity, deep and searching, punctuated only by our ragged, desperate breaths. He broke the kiss, but only to move, his mouth trailing fire along my jaw, his lips finding the pulse point at the base of my throat. I gasped, my head falling back, my fingers clenching in his jacket. He backed me against the cold glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights of Port Alder blurred behind us. A million fractured stars. Our breath fogged the glass, shielding us from the world below. My thin messenger bag dropped to the floor. His jacket followed, a heavy, dark pool of wool at our feet. He was trembling, or maybe I was. His hands were on my waist, pulling my hips against his, and I could feel the hard, coiled strength of him. He was a man who lived by control, and he was letting it go, piece by piece. He kissed me again, slower this time, but deeper. It was a kiss of possession, of promise. A small, green light on the baby monitor on the counter lit up. A soft, sleepy sigh, Leo turning in his crib. The sound so small, so innocent, cut through the passionate haze. Salvatore froze. He rested his forehead against mine, his breathing harsh and uneven. A low, ragged groan rumbled in his chest. I opened my eyes. He was looking at me, his eyes still dark, but now a flicker of something else. Humor. Reality. A breathless laugh escaped me. He smiled, a genuine, tired smile. He did not step away, but the fire banked. He pulled a thin, soft blanket from the back of the sofa and wrapped it around my shoulders, tucking it under my chin as if I were a child. His hands, however, were not a father's. One hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. He was still looking at me like I was the only thing in the world. He lowered his head and pressed his lips, soft and warm, to my right eyelid, then my left. He kissed the scratch on my cheek. He did not kiss my mouth. It was more intimate than that. His hands rested on my waist, over the blanket, his touch respectful, firm. He was giving the control back to me. That night, we did not sleep. We sat on the sofa, the blanket shared between us, and we watched the city come alive. We talked. For the first time, we truly talked. He told me about his foster mother, the one who taught him about power. I told him about my father, the one who taught me about debt. He told me about his fear of the betrayal, the rot he could not see. I told him about my fear of the men at the door, the terror of losing Leo. We talked about small, stupid things, about the smell of the harbor in the morning, about his favorite book. I told him I wanted a small garden, just a window box, something that could grow. In the gray hours before dawn, love did not arrive with a crash. It settled. It settled in the space between us, built not on kisses in the rain, but on shared trauma, on ugly truths, and on the promise of a quiet place to plant a garden for my son. It was a love that was forged in the storm, and for that reason, I knew it was strong enough to survive the calm. The city of Port Alder took a breath. For the first time since I had arrived, it felt like the fog had lifted. Jorapel's face was still on the news, but now it was a grainy mugshot. The Port Alder Commerce Authority was in chaos, its assets frozen. The PAIB, led by Ria's clean contact, had descended on Raven Key, and the glow of auditors' lights burned in the PACA offices all night. The Maritime Guild, smelling the political blood in the water, had scrubbed its hands clean and publicly canceled the tainted Sable Dock warehouse contract. The media called it the Clean Port Operation. They praised the anonymous whistleblowers and the swift action of the Integrity Bureau. The name Giardina was never mentioned. But the silence was loud in the penthouse, which had become our strange, fortified home. The atmosphere was watchful. "The old families are moving," Dario said one morning, looking up from his laptop. "The Callahans in the north, the Petrocelli crew, they smell a vacuum. They think you've gone soft, boss." Salvatore was at the counter, pouring milk into Leo's sippy cup. He did not look up. "Let them sniff. They're looking for a brawler. They're looking for the man I used to be." He handed the cup to Leo, who was sitting on the floor. "We're not brawling anymore. We're building." His pivot was swift and absolute. The old Giardina syndicate, the one built on shadows and fear, was being dismantled in its place. Salvatore was pouring his resources into legitimate ventures. He finalized the purchase of Green Pier Logistics, a move that gave him control of 3 of the cleanest docks on the harbor. He established something called the Fir Grove Micro Fund, a project Ria was managing. I found out what it was when I received a letter. It was not from Bright Light Credit. That company had vanished. A closed for renovations sign was taped to its door, but its accounts were frozen by the PAIB. My letter was from the Fir Grove Fund. It stated, in dry legal language, that my outstanding fraudulent harassment debt of $12,000 had been resolved. It was not just me, Ria told me, with a thin, satisfied smile, that the fund had quietly erased the predatory loans of over 200 families in the Graybridge district. Salvatore was redefining his power. He was not just shielding people, he was arming them. Clean money, he had said to me, attracts clean people. I went back to the Copper Lantern. It was mine, or technically, it was owned by a holding company that Ria managed, and I was the general manager. The first thing I did was rehire the busboy Trent had fired. The second thing I did was post a new sign in the employee break room. It was simple. Rule 1, we do not shout, All critiques are private. We solve problems. We do not create them. I stood there, looking at the sign, and thought of the sound of that broken plate. I thought of Salvatore's voice cutting through the silence, apologize to her. I was standing there, in fact, when the bell on the front door jangled. Trent Halvers. My stomach did not drop. My hands did not shake. I just felt tired. He looked terrible. His cheap suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "Mara," he said, trying for the old, greasy smile. "Heard you fell upward. Running the whole show, huh?" "What do you want, Trent?" He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, I'm in a jam, but I've got an out, and it includes you." He reeked of stale whiskey. "There's a federal task force in town. They're not local. They're looking at Giardina. Hard. They're offering full immunity. Relocation. For anyone who cooperates." I looked at him, the desperate, small-time hustler. "They just need to know you'll talk," he whispered, his eyes gleaming. I saw it, just below his collar, peeking from behind his ugly tie, a thin, black wire, a microphone. He was not just a snake, he was an idiot. A desperate man wearing a wire for a fake task force. Pell's last dying loyalists, or maybe another crew, trying to get leverage. I felt a surge, not of anger, but of pity. He was still playing the old game. I did not call Salvatore. I did not panic. I just raised my chin, looking past him to the new bouncer I had hired for the dinner shift, a very large, very calm man named Rico, who used to work for Dario. "Rico," I called out, my voice clear and strong. Trent flinched, his hand instinctively going to his chest, to the wire. Rico was there in 2 steps. "Yes, boss." "This man is trespassing," I said, my voice cold and even. "He appears to be attempting to record me without my consent. Please remove him." And I looked at Trent's pale, terrified face. "Call the police. Tell them we have a man who needs to file a harassment report, or maybe we do." Trent's face went white. He did not want the police. He scrambled, trying to pull the wire off. "Mara, please, Get him out," I said. Rico lifted Trent by the arm, and a new era of the copper lantern began. The peace lasted for 3 weeks, 3 weeks of near normalcy. The penthouse at the Berengar started to feel like a home. I had a small, thriving window box garden. Salvatore had taken me to the community garden on the roof. It was wild, overgrown, but it had potential. On a bright, clear Saturday, I saw a side of him I never knew existed. He was not Salvatore Giardina, the Don. He was Sal. Leo, who was now 2 and fearless, was on a small, red balance bike. Salvatore, in jeans and a gray t-shirt that showed the full, intricate compass on his arm, was jogging backward in front of him. "You got it. Leo, keep your head up, boss," he was saying, his voice warm. Leo giggled, his feet lifting off the ground as he balanced for 3-4 seconds. "Faster, Sal, faster!" Salvatore was laughing, a real, deep, unguarded laugh. His hands were hovering, ready to catch him, but he was letting him find his own balance. His eyes were not the eyes of a Don. They were not the eyes of a lover. They were the eyes of a father. I sat on a bench, my hands covered in soil from my tomato plants, and I watched them. This was it. The life I had never even dared to dream of. A safe place. A good man. A happy child. It was so perfect. It was terrifying. Perfection never lasts in Port Alder. That night, it broke. I was cleaning up the kitchen. Salvatore was reading a dinosaur book to Leo in the bedroom. My phone, charging on the counter, buzzed. I glanced at it, a text. The ID was blocked. My blood turned to ice. I wiped my wet hands on my jeans and picked up the phone. It was the same anonymous source who had warned me about the fake inspectors, the source that had vanished. The message was one line. "The last shipment gate 0 at low tide." "Salvatore," I called, my voice tight. He was in the doorway in a second, his face all hard angles. The father was gone. He saw my expression and took the phone. He read the text. His whole body went rigid. Gate 0, he breathed. It's not possible. It doesn't exist. What is it? It's a story, a smuggler's myth, an old tunnel system under the original Sable warehouse. They say it was sealed with concrete 100 years ago. Dario was there in 10 minutes. The laptops were open. The atmosphere of peace was gone, shattered. It exists, Dario said, his voice a low growl. He pulled up a scanned, sepia-toned map of the harbor, dated 1890. It was a customs avoidance tunnel. It connected the old wharf directly to the foundations of the warehouse. It's not on any modern chart, but it's here. It's a trap, I said, my voice shaking. It has to be. Pell is gone. Gio is in a federal holding cell. This is bigger than Pell, Salvatore said. This is who Pell was working for. Dario pointed to his other screen, a shipping manifest. There's a ship. Unflagged, no transponder. She's been sitting in the dark channel for 2 days. She's scheduled to move at low tide, tomorrow night. Salvatore became quiet. A dangerous, calculating quiet I had not seen since the night of the attack. He was making decisions, alone. He told me it was a final piece of Gio's network, a shipment Gio had set in motion weeks ago, and that the person on that ship was likely the real head of the snake. He had to know who it was. He kissed me, a long, deep kiss that tasted of finality. I will handle this, Mara, he said, his hands framing my face. This is the last piece. Then it's over. You and Leo will be safe. I promise. He said he was going to Green Pier Logistics for a late meeting. I knew he was lying. He was shielding me again. He thought he was protecting me, but he was shutting me out. I waited. I put Leo to bed. My son. My beautiful, safe son. He was clutching his favorite book, the one about the dinosaurs. I kissed his forehead and went to pull the blanket up. Something fell from between the pages. It was not a drawing. It was not a bookmark. It was a single, printed ticket, a private charter, a water taxi. Destination Sable Dock, Outer Buoy. Departure 1. AM, low tide. I stared at the ticket. He was going alone. He was going to walk into a trap, into a mythological tunnel, to face the real monster. All by himself. He thought he was protecting us. He had hidden the ticket in the one thing in this world he knew was safe, the one thing he knew I would protect. Our son's storybook. The brave, stupid, wonderful fool. He'd never been very good at hiding the things that mattered from me. The tide was out. The wind that ripped off the harbor at low tide was a northeaster, a blade of ice that smelled of exposed mud and century-old rot. The Sable warehouse was a skeletal silhouette against a bruised purple sky. And at its foundation, just above the slick, algae-covered stones, was a black, jagged hole, Gate 0. It was real. I knew he was already inside. I had the ancient map from the ledger, the one I had photographed. I had Rhea, and I had the clean unit of the PAIB, waiting a quarter mile out, their lights dark. I had left Leo with Dario, back at the Berengar. He was safe. For the first time, I was walking into the fire, and I knew, absolutely, that my son was protected. That was the only courage I needed. I moved through the shadows of the wharf, Rhea at my side, and we slipped into the tunnel. It smelled of brine and decay. We heard voices. We rounded a bend, and the tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous cistern under the warehouse foundation. A few bare, battery-powered bulbs cast a sickly yellow light. Salvatore was there. He stood alone in the center, his hands at his sides. Facing him was Gio Valley. He was out, bailed by a ghost. He held a metal box, a fake, a prop. He was flanked by 4 men I did not recognize. "You shouldn't have come, Sal," Gio said. His voice was tired. "This was always bigger than you." "Who?" "Gio." Salvatore's voice was calm, a deadly flatline. "Who pulled your strings?" Strings. A new voice, crisp and sharp, echoed from the deeper darkness. He was a puppet, Salvatore, and a clumsy one at that. A woman stepped into the light. She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a cashmere coat, her silver hair pulled back in a severe, elegant twist. Seraphine Cade, the president of the Port Council, the woman who had been on the stage with Jorah Pell. "Seraphine," Salvatore said, "no surprise, just confirmation." "You've been a thorn in my side for a decade, Salvatore," she said, pulling on a pair of leather gloves. "Pell was a useful idiot. Gio was a frustrated child. And your Bright Light Credit Company," she sneered, "was a brilliant piece of misdirection. All of it was to drain the old harbor, to make it ready for a cleansing. You," Salvatore realized, "you were the one laundering the money. Pell was just your bagman." "I was building a new Port Alder," she snapped, "but to do that, I needed a devil. I needed a monster to slay in the press." Her eyes, cold as the harbor water, settled on him. "You are the perfect monster. Giardina, the last of the old Mafia kings, and when you die down here tonight, in a syndicate war with your old lieutenant." She smiled. "My clean port initiative becomes a holy war. I will be the woman who finally scrubbed the Giardina stain from this city, and your little waitress." She glanced at the tunnel where I was hiding, though she could not see me. "Will just be the whore who died at your side." I saw Salvatore's hand twitch. He was trapped. He knew it. If he pulled a gun, if he fought back, if he killed any of them, he would prove her right. He would die as the monster she had painted. His story and mine would be a lie. "Now, Gio," Seraphine ordered. "Finish it." "Rhea now," I screamed. The world exploded in light. Not an explosion. Floodlights, massive, broadcast-quality lights on battery packs, positioned at the far end of the tunnel. They clicked on, illuminating the entire cistern, turning the sickly yellow gloom into a harsh, sterile white. I stepped out, Rhea beside me. Behind us were 3 uniformed PAIB officers and a man with a broadcast-ready camera on his shoulder. A steady, red recording light was on. Seraphine Cade, Rhea's voice, amplified by a bullhorn, was a hammer blow. "You are live on a direct feed to every news station in Port Alder. The signal is being broadcast publicly. There is no cutting this feed." Seraphine's face, for 1 second, was a mask of pure, reptilian hatred. She'd been outplayed. We had brought the one thing she could not fight: the light. She screamed a raw, inhuman sound of rage. She did not run. She did not surrender. She yanked a small, military-grade detonator from her coat pocket. "If I cannot have this port," she shrieked, "I will bury it." She slammed her thumb down on the button. A deep, groaning roar filled the air. It was not a single bomb. It was a series of small, structural charges, deep in the foundations. The ground bucked. The ancient tunnel was not built for this. A crack, like thunder, split the ceiling. Water black, freezing, pressurized harbor water did not leak. It erupted. It burst through a dozen fissures in the wall. "Mara," Salvatore yelled. I was frozen, watching the wall of water pour in. A huge, rusted iron support beam directly above me tore free from the ceiling. Salvatore did not run to me. He launched himself across the space. He hit me. It was the same tackle from the alley. His body was a shield. He did not try to pull me away. He wrapped himself around me, his long coat enveloping my body, his back to the falling ceiling. The beam crashed down. It struck his shoulder with a sickening sound of tearing fabric and metal on bone. He roared, a sound of pure agony, but he did not let go. He held me, his face buried in my neck as the icy water surged around our knees. Across the cistern, Giovanni was watching. He saw Salvatore take the blow. He saw him shield me, without hesitation, accepting a crippling injury to save me. Gio's face, which had been a mask of bitter resolve, just broke. He saw the one thing he had betrayed, the one thing he would never have. The knife he had pulled dropped from his hand, splashing into the rising water. As another section of the tunnel collapsed, blocking the PAIB's exit, Gio turned. He looked at the officers. He looked at Rhea. When he set his feet, put his hands against the falling crossbeam, and held it. "Go," he yelled at them, his muscles straining. "Go get her out." He was buying them time, an atonement. The water was at my waist. It was so cold I could not breathe. Salvatore was slumped against me, conscious, but his left arm was useless. Seraphine Cade was trapped. The water had pinned her against a collapsed section of wall. It was rising to her chest. Her elegance was gone. She was just a terrified, drowning woman. "Help me," she shrieked, her hands clawing at the slick stone. I can make a deal. I have offshore accounts. I'll negotiate. Help me." I pulled myself from under Salvatore's grip. I waded through the chest-deep water, the current pulling at me. The PIB camera was still rolling, capturing it all. I reached her. I held out my hand, my right hand, scarred from the plate, scarred from the rope, but steady. She grabbed it. I pulled, straining. "No one," I said, my voice cutting through the roar of the water, straight into the camera's microphone, "deserves to die in a hole like this. Not even the woman who tried to make my son homeless." I yanked her free from the wall and shoved her toward the waiting arms of a PIB officer. Ria was there. "Seraphine Cade," she said, her voice dripping ice. "You are under arrest." It was over. The lights, the camera, the shouting, it all faded. It was just us, Salvatore and I, standing in the middle of the ruined, flooded cistern, shaking from cold and adrenaline. The water was already receding, pouring back out with the tide. He waded over to me, his left arm hanging uselessly, his face pale and etched with pain. He reached up with his good hand and touched my face. "I told you," he whispered, his voice rough. "I will always stand up before anyone can yell at you." I smiled, a sob catching in my throat. I leaned my forehead against his. "I know. But look around, Sal." I gestured to the wreckage, the retreating police. "There's no one left to yell." He pulled me against him, his arm wrapped around my waist, holding me up, and he kissed me. It was not the desperate kiss of the attack or the tentative kiss of the apartment. This was a kiss of survival. It was deep, and it was warm despite the freezing water. It tasted of salt and rust, and the end of a war. His hand splayed across my back, covering my shoulder blades, holding me, shielding me. Even now, it was not the kiss of a whirlwind adventure. It was the kiss of a foundation. It was the kiss of a man who was, finally, home. The epilogue was written in the quiet actions of the following weeks. Green Pier Logistics, under its new, entirely legitimate board, assumed control of the contracts for the Sable Dock. The Fir Grove Microfund announced its first major project, the full renovation and purchase of the Gray Bridge apartments, turning them into protected, low-income housing, and at the Copper Lantern, the new Rule 1 plaque became a famous part of the restaurant's charm. The community garden on the roof of the Berengar was thriving. It was a bright Sunday. Leo was there, giggling as he finally mastered the red balance bike, wobbling in triumphant circles on the pathway. I sat on a bench, a new contract in my lap, not alone, a management contract for a second Copper Lantern, opening in the Civic East District. Salvatore, his arm in a black sling, his white shirt sleeve rolled up past the compass tattoo on his good arm, was spreading a picnic blanket. I watched him, a slow smile spreading across my face. "You know," I said, my voice teasing, "I dropped a plate once, just one, and this man stood up before anyone could even take a breath to yell at me." Salvatore stopped, the blanket half spread. He looked at me, the pain gone from his eyes, replaced by that rare, soft light. "In my whole life, Mara," he said, his voice quiet. "Only a few seconds mattered as much as that one." He leaned down, his good arm coming around my waist, and gave me a soft, slow kiss. Across the garden, Leo completed a full circle without falling, and the other residents, the other gardeners, burst into applause. And that is how the story spread in Port Alder, not as a crime report, but as a legend, the story of the single mom who learned to stand on her own feet, and the story of the mafia boss who learned that real power was not in standing over anyone, but in standing up for someone. It was a love story that was quiet and controlled and strong enough to last. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video. And if you enjoyed this story, please support it by hitting that hype button so it can be heard by more people.